Welcome to Jordan Pierce Stories, the place where powerful, dramatic, and deeply moving stories come to life. Today, we begin the journey titled, The Job Everyone Rejected. A black single dad faced a billionaire and found love. This is not just a tale about fear, challenges, and power, but also about the unbreakable bond between a father and his child, about resilience, and about love that blossoms in the most unexpected place. Across 8 thrilling chapters, you'll witness a black single dad stepping into a job no one dared to take, standing face to face with a ruthless billionaire, and slowly uncovering the truth hidden behind the billionaire's cold exterior. Will this terrifying job break him, or will it lead him to happiness and love? Stay with us until the very end, because this story will take you from suspense and shock to sweetness and hope. And don't forget to hit subscribe to Jordan Pierce Stories so you never miss the next dramatic, surprising, and inspirational journey. In a modest neighborhood in Atlanta, Marcus Johnson, a 32-year-old black single dad, was struggling to brew coffee with a machine that had been rattling for months. The thing was hanging on by a thread, much like his bank account, which only stretched far enough to cover diapers and rent. From the tiny apartment came the cheerful voice of his 8-year-old daughter, Kayla. "Daddy, you've got that interview today, right? Don't forget the tie. You look, more professional with it." Marcus chuckled, half out of love, half out of irony. Professional? He'd been unemployed for nearly half a year. The rideshare job that once kept them afloat had vanished after a minor accident. Not his fault. But the company didn't care. Now, the only job the employment office kept pushing him toward was chauffeuring one of the most notoriously difficult billionaires in the city, Mr. Richard Sterling. Just the name sent shivers down the spines of applicants. Rumor had it, one wrong turn and you'd be fired on the spot. Some even swore Sterling once dismissed a driver for playing the radio too loud. "If I work for him, I'll be bald from stress in a week," Marcus muttered, eyeing his curly hair in the mirror. Then he sighed. Bald or not, rent's got to get paid. He glanced at the pile of overdue bills and thought of his daughter's innocent smile. Sometimes fatherhood was stronger than fear, and this time he had no choice but to face it. The employment office was packed. Most were applying for regular jobs, receptionists, security guards, assistants. But when they heard he was here for Mr. Sterling's personal driver, every head turned, some with pity, others with morbid curiosity. A man beside him whispered, "You really gonna try that, buddy?" The last guy lasted 3 days. Marcus shrugged, flashing a half smile, half grimace. 3 days is still enough to pay the electric bill. If I'm lucky, maybe I'll even keep my hair. What Marcus didn't know was that this sarcastic little joke was the first step into a whirlwind that would change his life forever. Marcus stepped into the gleaming office tower, instantly feeling like a stain on a perfectly polished canvas. The marble floors shined. The receptionist in her sharp uniform eyed him up and down as if silently asking, "Are you sure you belong here?" "I'm here for the interview, for Mr. Sterling's personal driver," Marcus said, his voice wavering but still trying to sound steady. The receptionist raised a brow and motioned for him to wait. Minutes dragged on like hours. Other candidates were quickly called in and out, while Marcus sat there, deliberately left stewing in his own nerves. After nearly an hour, a man in a black suit appeared. He looked like he'd walked straight out of a spy movie. Cold eyes, expressionless face. "Johnson, Marcus. Follow me." Marcus swallowed hard and entered a massive office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A tall, silver-haired man in a perfectly tailored suit sat with his back turned, gazing out at the skyline. No introduction was needed. "Richard Sterling. You're Johnson." The voice was sharp, metallic. "Yes, sir," Marcus answered, heart pounding. Sterling spun his chair around. His face was lean, almost hawk-like, with eyes that seemed to pierce straight through flesh and bone. He scanned Marcus from head to toe before curling his lips. Half smile, half sneer. "Your record is unimpressive. Car accident, unemployed, living off assistance. A single dad with an 8-year-old girl. Why should I believe you won't run away like the rest?" Marcus inhaled deeply. If he didn't speak up now, the opportunity was gone. Locking eyes with Sterling, he said steadily, "Sir, I have nothing left to lose but this job, and I have one reason strong enough to keep me here." "A reason?" Sterling arched a brow. "My daughter," Marcus replied, throat tight. "I need to provide for her, and I'll do whatever it takes to prove I'm worth this." Silence filled the room. Sterling tapped his fingers against the desk, weighing him. Then, unexpectedly, he let out a sharp laugh. "Fine. Tomorrow, 6 a.m., not a minute late. If you are, don't bother coming back." Marcus nodded quickly, torn between relief and dread. He had no idea this was just the beginning of either a nightmare or a miraculous twist fate had in store. By 5:50 a.m., Marcus was already standing outside Richard Sterling's mansion. He wore his crisply ironed shirt, a neatly knotted tie, and shoes polished so well the neighbors thought he was headed to a wedding. In truth, he was just trying to look professional, because with a boss like Sterling, first impressions could be a matter of survival. The massive gates swung open, revealing a gleaming Rolls-Royce Phantom waiting in the garage. Marcus swallowed hard, thinking, if I scratch this car, I'll have to sell my apartment to pay for it. Before he could even slide behind the wheel, Sterling's voice cut through the morning air, cold as ever. "You're early. Good. But today isn't just about driving. I need to know if you've got the nerve." Marcus barely had time to react before Sterling tossed him the keys and pointed to a map on the passenger seat. "Take me to the airport. Fastest route, your choice. But if we're late by even 1 minute..." "Well, you know what happens." Marcus's heart pounded. This was clearly a test. He started the engine, forcing himself to stay calm. The streets of Atlanta at rush hour were a battlefield. Honking horns, aggressive drivers, endless red lights. Sterling sat in the back, arms crossed, silent, eyes boring into Marcus's neck like daggers. "God, this job feels like starring in an action movie," Marcus muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. At a jammed intersection, he faced a choice: stick to the main road, safe but slow, or cut through a narrow, twisting backstreet most drivers avoided. He took a deep breath and swerved into the alley. Sterling raised an eyebrow, saying nothing, but there was a flicker of interest in his eyes. Marcus maneuvered through tight corners, avoiding collisions by inches, his pulse hammered in sync with the roaring engine. When the Rolls finally burst back onto the main road near the airport, Marcus caught what sounded like a faint, amused chuckle from Sterling, 15 minutes early. "Not bad, Johnson, but don't fool yourself. This was only the warm-up." Marcus exhaled shakily, realizing one thing. This job would be filled with deadly tests, and he'd have to survive them all for his daughter's future. As Marcus pulled the car up to the VIP terminal, a group of staff hurried over, bowing to Richard Sterling as though he were royalty. Sterling stepped out, adjusted his collar, and shot Marcus a look that was equal parts irritation and curiosity, like he hadn't quite decided whether Marcus was just a lucky amateur or a pawn worth keeping. "You did better than I expected," Sterling said, his voice heavy as stone. "But remember this, working for me is not just about driving. You'll see soon enough. This world is harsher than you think, and I have no room for weakness." Marcus swallowed hard and nodded. Questions swirled in his mind. Why would a driver need that kind of resilience? What exactly was Sterling hinting at? When Sterling disappeared inside, Marcus stayed behind the wheel, heart still pounding. He glanced at the map still lying on the passenger seat. In the corner were strange markings, symbols, almost like a code. A chill ran through him. This was no ordinary chauffeur job. His phone buzzed. A text from Kayla lit up the screen. "Daddy, how was the interview? Are you okay? I know you can do this." Marcus smiled at the message, but his chest tightened with unease. He knew he had just stepped into a world woven with power, secrets, and danger, and from this moment on, there was no turning back. The next morning, before the sun had even risen, Marcus stood once again at the gates of Sterling's mansion. This time, the gates opened not just to reveal the familiar Rolls-Royce, but an entire world of extravagance, borderline ridiculous. Really, the estate was so vast, Marcus thought. This place could house an entire football team, pool, tennis court, and, wait, is that a wine cellar or a museum? Everything sparkled, pristine to the point of absurdity, making a man who once debated between buying gas or buying milk feel like he'd stumbled into a reality show about the rich and untouchable. An elderly butler appeared, bowing politely. "Mr. Sterling requests that you come inside. He wishes to test you further." A shiver ran through Marcus. Another test? What was this, finals week? But he bit his tongue. Complaining wouldn't pay the rent. Inside, the grand hall was cathedral-like, ceilings soaring, crystal chandeliers blazing above. Marcus tilted his head back in awe, nearly tripping over his own feet. At the far end, Sterling sat reading a newspaper, relaxed in posture but razor-sharp in gaze. as though he'd already scanned every thought in Marcus's head. "You're punctual." "Good," Sterling said, folding the paper. "But to work for me, there's one thing you must understand. Loyalty. Not just loyalty on the road, but loyalty inside this house." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean by that?" Sterling rose, walking slowly until he stood inches away. "You'll see things here. Things not everyone is allowed to see. And if you betray me or breathe a word to anyone," he smirked, "let's just say those 3 days people like to joke about, that would feel like a mercy compared to what's waiting for you." A chill ran down Marcus's spine. In that moment, he realized this job wasn't just about driving. It was an entry into a dangerous game where one wrong move could cost him everything. Marcus followed the butler deeper into the mansion. The hallway was so long he thought, man, just walking this corridor counts as cardio. Priceless paintings and sculptures lined the walls, each piece probably worth more than his yearly rent. The butler stopped at a dark wooden door, turning to him with a grave tone. "There is one place in this house you must never set foot in, the last room at the end of the third-floor hall." "Remember this, Johnson," Marcus raised a brow. "Of course, always got to have a forbidden room. What's a rich man's mansion without one?" He kept the sarcasm in his head while outwardly nodding politely. When Sterling appeared, he handed Marcus a slim folder. "You'll drive me, yes, but there will also be trips, not listed on any official schedule. If anyone asks, you know nothing." "Understood." Marcus glanced at it. Locations marked in red, most on the quiet outskirts of town. It felt less like chauffeuring and more like being drafted into some shady operation. He wanted to ask why, but Sterling's piercing stare killed the question before it left his lips. Instead, Marcus replied simply, "Yes, sir." Sterling nodded, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Good, you know how to keep your mouth shut. That's a rare quality." As Marcus left the room, unease weighed heavy on his chest. His daughter's cheerful laugh echoed in his mind, along with last night's encouraging text. "For Kayla, I can endure anything," he told himself. But what on earth is he hiding in that room? That afternoon, Sterling emerged from the mansion in a pinstripe grey suit, his eyes cold as steel. Without a word, he tossed Marcus a scrap of paper with a hastily scribbled address. "Not on the official schedule. Don't ask. Just drive." Marcus glanced down. The destination was an old warehouse on the outskirts of town, the kind locals avoided like the plague. He swallowed hard, started the engine, and thought, fantastic. I'm officially a driver for some film noir operation. The ride was tense, the air thick with silence. Sterling stared out the window, expression unreadable. Marcus gripped the wheel, trying to keep his hands steady. Every red light felt like an eternity. When they arrived, a group of men in black were already waiting. They looked nothing like office clerks or casual friends, more like bodyguards or gangsters. One stepped forward, opening Sterling's door. "Everything's ready, sir." Sterling nodded, then turned to Marcus. "Wait here. Do not leave the car. If anyone approaches, you know what to do." Marcus's jaw dropped. "Me? Know what to do? I'm just the driver," he screamed internally. Out loud, he only managed a stiff, "Yes, sir." Sterling disappeared into the warehouse, the heavy door slamming shut. Marcus sat alone in the car, pulse racing. The area was deserted, just the whistle of wind and the caw of crows on the tin roof. The whole scene looked like the opening act of a crime movie. And the driver character in those? Yeah, they usually didn't make it out alive. Marcus took a deep breath and muttered, "Lord, please don't let me become the disposable chauffeur in episode 1. Marcus sat in the car, forcing himself to stay calm. Just sit here. Don't snoop. Don't cause trouble. Easy as pie. Except life was never easy for a single dad working for a mysterious billionaire. Minutes later, an old truck rattled down the dusty road and stopped a few yards away. Its engine coughed and died. 2 men climbed out, eyes locking straight onto Marcus's Rolls-Royce as if they knew exactly what was inside. Marcus swallowed hard, sweat prickling his neck. "Don't come closer. Please, just don't." But of course they did. One of them rapped hard on the window, flashing a cocky half smile. "Hey driver, where's your boss? Got anything valuable in there?" Marcus remembered Sterling's words. "If anyone comes close, you know what to do." Problem was, he had no clue what to do. He rolled the window down an inch, forcing a nervous smile. "Sorry, fellas. Wrong car. Just a rental. Nothing worth your time." The man smirked and signaled to his buddy. They circled the car, knocking on the panels, even tugging at the door handle. Marcus's heart hammered. He darted a glance toward the warehouse, still sealed shut, no sign of Sterling. Taking a deep breath, Marcus suddenly slammed the horn. The deafening blast echoed across the empty lot, scattering the crows above. The two men jumped back, startled. One snarled, "Fine, driver, but here's a free warning. Don't get too close to Sterling." Nobody around him. Ends up well. They climbed back into their truck, engine roaring to life, and drove off. Marcus sat frozen behind the wheel, pulse racing. He had escaped trouble this time, but those words haunted him. Nobody around Sterling ends up well. That night, Marcus dragged himself back to his tiny apartment, utterly drained. He dropped the car keys on the table and collapsed onto the worn-out sofa. Kayla darted over and hugged him tight. "Daddy, how was work today?" she asked innocently. Marcus stared into her wide, sparkling eyes, wanting to say, "It was fine." But the words stuck in his throat. Fine? When he'd just been confronted by two strangers warning him about his new boss, when he was chauffeuring a billionaire whose side trips were shadier than midnight, he stroked her hair and forced a smile. "It was fine, sweetheart. Daddy did good." But when Kayla skipped off to her homework, Marcus sat frozen, replaying that haunting line. Nobody around Sterling ends up well. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Mr. Johnson, we know you've just started working for Sterling. Be careful. He's not just a billionaire." A chill shot down Marcus's spine. Who was watching him? How did they have his number? And what did "not just a billionaire" even mean? He moved to the window, peeking through the blinds. Across the dark street sat a black car, headlights off, windows tinted. Marcus couldn't see inside, but he could feel someone watching. He pulled the curtains shut and whispered, "God, I just started this job, and I might already be in too deep." A knock came just before midnight. Marcus's heart jumped, pounding like a drum. He glanced at Kayla, sleeping soundly in her room, then crept to the door. "Who's there?" he called, his voice rough. No answer, just a brown envelope slid under the door. Marcus tore it open. Inside was a single scrap of paper, scrawled in red ink. "Don't trust Sterling. Don't let your daughter get involved." Cold sweat trickled down his neck. Someone was watching him closely. He rushed into the hallway, but all he found was the flicker of a buzzing light and an empty corridor. The black car from earlier was gone. Back inside, Marcus gripped the note tight. Fear churned inside him, but so did anger. All I wanted was a job to feed my kid, not to be dragged into some power game. If Sterling's tied to this, he's even more dangerous than I thought. He peeked into Kayla's room. She slept peacefully, clutching her teddy bear. Marcus whispered, "I'll protect you, baby, no matter what it takes, even if it means going up against the most powerful billionaire in this city." The next morning, Marcus couldn't focus. His coffee sat cold on the table as he stared at the note with its red scrawl. The warning replayed in his head like a broken record. He opened his old laptop and typed in Richard Sterling. The search results flooded with images. Sterling shaking hands with politicians, attending charity galas, cutting ribbons at hospitals. In the press, he was practically a saint, a generous billionaire, a model businessman. Marcus let out a dry laugh. Yeah, if there was an Oscar for best performance in charity work, he'd win every year. Digging deeper, Marcus uncovered smaller, less publicized stories, shadowy subsidiaries, lawsuits that vanished, and one in particular, a mysterious disappearance of an employee who had worked very closely with Sterling. Marcus straightened, eyes wide. "So I'm not the first to be warned. Someone else disappeared before me." His phone rang. Sterling. The man's voice was clipped, emotionless. "Prepare the car. An important trip." No one can know, Marcus froze. After what he'd just read, and after last night's encounter, every nerve in his body screamed, "Danger!" But he also knew refusing meant no job, and no way to provide for Kayla. He glanced at her framed photo on the table, then picked up the car keys. "All right, Mr. Sterling, but this time I'll be watching." Late that afternoon, Marcus drove Sterling out of the city. Not to the airport, not to some fancy restaurant, but to an abandoned building in an old industrial district. The streets were empty, lit only by flickering yellow streetlights and the hum of the engine. "Stop here," Sterling ordered. Marcus parked, eyes scanning the area. A group of men in dark clothing stood waiting, faces carved in stone. They bowed to Sterling as though he were a king. Marcus couldn't hear their words, but he saw large leather bags being exchanged. He squinted. Cash? Documents? Or something far worse? Suddenly, one of the men turned and stared at Marcus with suspicion. He approached, rapping on the window. Marcus forced himself to stay calm, rolling it down just an inch. "Can he be trusted?" the man asked Sterling. The air went cold. Marcus held his breath, heart hammering. This was a make-or-break moment. Sterling glanced at him, eyes sharp, lips curling into a thin smile. "He's mine. If I trust him, you trust him. And if not, I'll handle him myself." The words felt like both protection and a veiled threat. Marcus knew if Sterling changed his mind for even a second, he'd disappear from this world without a trace. When the exchange ended, Sterling returned to the car, slamming the door shut. "Drive," he said, as if nothing had happened. Marcus gripped the wheel tight. He had just witnessed something terrifying. And he knew from this moment on, he was no longer just a chauffeur. He was now part of Richard Sterling's dangerous world. After witnessing the shady exchange that night, Marcus barely slept. Every creak outside his window jolted him awake. He knew. He had seen too much, and now he wasn't just an outsider anymore. The next morning, Kayla tugged at his hand, chirping, "Daddy, today's my school recital. You have to come." Marcus froze. Images of Sterling's cold stare in that warehouse, those heavy leather bags, flashed through his mind. If those men ever find out I have a daughter, would they stop at anything? Forcing a smile, he patted her head. "Of course, sweetheart. Daddy will be there." But that afternoon, as he dropped her off at school, a strange car idled near the gate. Inside sat a man in dark sunglasses, eyes fixed on Kayla. Marcus's chest tightened. He quickly shielded her, hurrying her inside. When he turned back, the car was gone, as if it had never been there. Marcus stood frozen, sweat prickling despite the cool air. He understood now. The shadows of Sterling's world were creeping into his private life, and the next one pulled into danger would be his daughter. That night, Marcus returned to the mansion, fury boiling inside him. He was no longer just a driver afraid of losing his job. He was a father afraid of losing his child. Sterling lounged in the grand living room, sipping red wine like some modern-day king. When Marcus entered, Sterling looked up, his eyes sharp as blades. "You seem unsettled," Sterling observed. Marcus clenched his fists. "There was a strange car watching my daughter at school today. Was that connected to you?" The room went heavy. Sterling set down his glass, leaning back with unnerving calm. "If someone is watching your daughter, it means you're more important than you realize. And maybe I'm not the one you should be afraid of." Marcus's blood boiled. "Cut the riddles! You dragged me into this, and now my family's at risk. If Kayla gets hurt, I swear You'll what?" Sterling cut him off, voice steady but laced with menace. He stood, stepping closer until his whisper brushed Marcus's ear. "You think you have choices here, Johnson. In this game, you and I are both pawns. The only difference is, I know the rules. You don't." Marcus backed away, chest heaving with rage and helplessness. Sterling had said it plain. This wasn't just a job. It was a deadly game he couldn't walk away from. But in Marcus's eyes flickered a new resolve. "For Kayla, I'll learn the rules. And when the time comes, I'll flip the whole damn board." After the tense confrontation with Sterling, Marcus left the mansion with a heart heavy as stone. The late-night road home was pitch black, lit only by the flicker of dying streetlights. He tried to steady himself, but thoughts of Kayla gnawed at him. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "If you want to protect your daughter, meet me. Old cafe near the train station, 11 p.m. Come alone." Marcus frowned. A trap? Maybe. But if this was a chance to learn the truth, he couldn't ignore it. He left Kayla with a close friend for safety, then slipped quietly to the meeting spot. The cafe had long been abandoned. Its sign faded, windows coated in dust. In a shadowed corner sat a woman in a long coat. "Mr. Johnson." Her voice was low but firm. Marcus sat down cautiously. "Who are you?" The woman locked eyes with him. In the dim amber light, her gaze was unwavering. "I used to work for Sterling, and I'm the only one who ever escaped him alive." Marcus froze. The rumor he had only skimmed in obscure news reports was now sitting right across from him. The woman took a sip of thick black coffee, setting the cup down with trembling hands. Marcus realized it wasn't the cold that made her shake. It was the memories. "My name is Helena. I was Sterling's personal secretary for nearly 10 years, she began slowly. "Out there, he's the philanthropist, the model billionaire. But behind closed doors," her eyes drifted toward the darkened window. "He runs a shadow empire. Dirty money, dirty politics, and disappearances that never made the news. Marcus's chest tightened. The rumors, the scattered warnings, all of it now stitched into a terrifying picture. Helena's eyes glistened as she stared at him. Sterling trusts no one. He uses people like pawns. When I discovered the truth about the forbidden room on the 3rd floor, I fled, and I've lived in fear ever since. But I can't let another soul, especially a child, get dragged into his game. Marcus's fists clenched. He pressed her. What's in that room? What's he hiding? Helena hesitated, then whispered. Evidence. Files on the people he's destroyed, the bribes, the list of those who disappeared. Believe me, Marcus, if you step into that room, you'll understand why they call Sterling the devil in a suit. A chill coursed down Marcus's spine. He knew one thing for certain. Sooner or later, he would have to face whatever secret lay inside that room. Back at his apartment after meeting Helena, Marcus sat for hours on the worn sofa, silent. The warning note, Sterling's cold stare, and Helena's chilling words kept spinning through his mind. Kayla ran up, proudly showing him a drawing from school. Look, Daddy, I drew us in the park, and we're eating ice cream. Marcus smiled, hugging her tight, but inside, 2 worlds collided. Her innocence on one side, and the terrifying darkness pulling him deeper on the other. He whispered to himself, if I stay silent, maybe we'll be safe, at least for a while. But if Sterling is as dangerous as Helena says, Kayla will grow up forever trapped in his shadow. What am I supposed to do? That night, Marcus tossed and turned. He imagined Kayla growing up in constant fear, always watched by Sterling's dark empire. The thought crushed him. Finally, he rose and stared at his reflection in the mirror. His face was weary, but his eyes were different now, fierce, defiant, unshaken. No, I won't let him control my life, and I'll never let him touch my daughter. Marcus knew this choice meant stepping straight into danger, but to him, it was the only choice left. The next day, Marcus returned to Sterling's mansion, masking himself in routine. He opened doors, bowed politely, followed orders, but inside, a reckless plan was taking shape. He remembered Helena's words. The last room at the end of the 3rd floor hall. That's where the truth is. That evening, while Sterling was away at a lavish gala, Marcus used the excuse of checking the car and slipped back inside the mansion. His heart pounded as he climbed the staircase. The long hallway stretched ahead, marble floors echoing with every step. At the end stood the dark wooden door, the one the butler had warned him about, the door that hid everything. Marcus reached for the handle. It was cold as ice. He tried it, locked. He almost turned away, but the thought struck. If I don't open this now, I may never get another chance. From his pocket, he pulled a paperclip, an old trick from his taxi driving days when trunks would jam. With trembling hands, he worked the lock. Seconds stretched like hours, then click. The lock gave way. Marcus drew a deep breath and pushed the door open. A gust of stale air rushed out, smelling of old paper and rusted steel. Before him loomed rows of files, stacks of boxes, and a massive safe anchoring the center of the room. He whispered, God, Helena was right. Marcus stepped cautiously into the room. The air was thick with dust, old leather, and something else. Something cold, as if the place had swallowed too many souls. He flicked on his phone's flashlight, sweeping across shelves stacked to the ceiling. Names jumped out from the file labels. Reynolds, disappeared 2017. Carter, settlement closed. Johnson, confidential. Marcus froze. Johnson? His own last name. He yanked the folder out. No, not him. Another Johnson. Still, the coincidence chilled him to the bone. Flipping through the pages, he found forged contracts, photos of politicians taking bribes, sealed bank records stamped in red. Each piece was another shard of evidence, pointing to Sterling as the mastermind of a vast, corrupt empire. In the corner sat a small metal box. Marcus pried it open and gasped. Inside were photographs, not just of businessmen and officials, but of their families, wives, husbands, children. Sterling didn't just target rivals, he terrorized their loved ones. Marcus's hands trembled. He understood immediately. Kayla could easily become a pawn in this same game. Then, footsteps in the hallway. He snapped off the light, heart hammering, shoving one folder inside his jacket. Marcus pressed flat against the wall, barely breathing. The door creaked. Someone was trying to open it. The door creaked open an inch, then stopped. Marcus froze, every muscle locked. A sliver of light sliced into the room, sharp as a blade. "Is someone in there?" The butler's voice, raspy yet cutting, echoed. Marcus's heart pounded, sweat slicking his palms. If he was caught, he wouldn't live to see tomorrow. He pressed himself flat against the wall, trying to melt into the shadows. Footsteps entered. The butler swept a flashlight across the room. The beam hovered dangerously close, grazing the spot where Marcus stood, barely inches away. Marcus shut his eyes tight, praying. Then, a phone rang in the hallway. The butler flinched, snapped off the light, and hurried out. Before leaving, he slammed the heavy door shut, the sound booming like a gunshot. The room fell into pitch-black silence. Marcus leaned against the wall, gasping for breath, his heart still pounding like a war drum. God, I just dodged death by an inch. But with this file in my jacket, there's no going back now. Adjusting his coat to conceal the stolen documents, Marcus slipped out of the forbidden room, like a thief carrying the world's most dangerous secret. Back at his apartment, Marcus locked the door, drew the curtains, and turned on the desk lamp. He laid the stolen folder from the forbidden room on the table. His hands shook as he flipped through the pages. Inside were spreadsheets crammed with numbers, money transfers routed through shell companies, and powerful names repeated again and again. Politicians, judges, businessmen, all tied to Sterling. Marcus's breath quickened. Dear God, he's bought the whole city. Then his eyes froze on a familiar name. Helena M., with a chilling note beside it. Escaped, unfinished business. Marcus swallowed hard. Sterling was still hunting Helena, and if he knew Marcus had met her, Kayla would be the next target. He turned another page. A thin envelope slipped out. Inside were photographs. Kayla walking to school. Kayla at the playground. Even a shot of Marcus hugging her at their apartment door. Marcus's blood ran cold. He clenched the photos so hard they crumpled. There was no doubt now. Sterling knew everything. Then, 3 heavy knocks rattled the door. Marcus jumped, shoving the file into a drawer. He crept toward the door, heart pounding. Marcus Johnson, a deep male voice called from outside. Marcus froze. Who was at his door? At this exact moment, Marcus froze by the door, heart racing. The man's voice boomed again, pounding like a hammer against his chest. Marcus Johnson, open up. I don't have much time. Scenarios flashed through his mind. Sterling's hitman, mob enforcers, or an ally? He hesitated, then asked quietly, Who are you? Silence outside. Then the voice replied, low and urgent. Someone who knows Sterling too well. If you want to protect your daughter, you'll hear me out. Marcus inhaled sharply, unlatched the lock but kept the chain secured. Standing outside was a middle-aged man in a long coat, his face shadowed, but his eyes glinting. My name's Daniel. I was Sterling's accountant, he said, and I know how to bring him down. Marcus blinked, stunned. Before he could speak, Daniel pressed a small USB drive into his hand. This holds the data. I can't keep it any longer. If he finds out I'm dead now, it's your responsibility. Marcus stared at the tiny device that suddenly felt heavy as lead. In that moment, he realized he was no longer just a witness. He now held the key to destroying Sterling's empire. Outside, an engine roared. Headlights slashed across the window. Daniel stiffened. He knows I'm here. Hide, and trust no one. With that, he vanished into the night, leaving Marcus trembling, clutching the USB, his and Kayla's fate balanced on it. Marcus slammed the door shut, his heart pounding like a war drum. He drew the curtains, checked the locks again, then sank into the chair, the tiny USB clenched in his fist. Just a piece of plastic. But it could decide my and Kayla's entire future. Finally, he powered up his old laptop and plugged the USB in. The screen lit up, showing a maze of encrypted folders. Marcus clicked one at random, then his stomach dropped. Hundreds of audio files. Sterling's voice filled the speakers, cold and deliberate, discussing money laundering, bribing politicians, even ordering disposals of those who crossed him. Cold sweat ran down Marcus's back. Helena had been right. No, it was even worse than she'd said. He opened another file. Surveillance footage. Trucks rolling in and out of the warehouse on the outskirts. Covered cargo, too heavy, too secretive. Whatever it was illegal. Then another folder. Photos. Marcus's heart stopped when he saw them. Among the images of businessmen and officials were pictures of Kayla, recent ones, clear, close, taken from angles only a stalker could manage. Marcus's hands shook, slamming a fist on the table. Damn it, he's targeting my daughter. In that moment, fear in Marcus's chest burned into rage. He knew keeping this USB made him a target, but it was also the only weapon powerful enough to bring Sterling down. Marcus sat frozen in front of the screen, eyes bloodshot from the strain. The files, the voices on the USB, echoed in his head like whispers from hell. Beside the laptop, a photo of Kayla smiling innocently made his chest ache even harder. He knew, from this moment on, he wasn't just a nameless chauffeur. He was the only man alive outside Sterling who held the key to destroying the Empire, which also made him the next target to be erased. Pacing the room, Marcus wrestled with himself. I could run, take Kayla, vanish from the city, but Sterling's reach is everywhere. Running would just mean dying slower. If I want to protect her, I have to strike first. His phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number lit up. You can't do this alone. Helena and I will be in touch. If you truly want to take Sterling down, the time to begin is now. Daniel. Marcus exhaled sharply. He remembered Helena's haunted eyes, the tremor in her voice when she spoke of the forbidden room. Daniel's urgency when he handed him the USB. They had every reason to fear, but still chose to resist. He glanced toward Kayla's room, where she slept soundly, clutching her teddy bear. Fear melted into resolve. Marcus whispered, "All right, if this is a game I have to play, then I'll play it, but this time I'm writing the rules." Marcus met Helena and Daniel in a dingy rented room behind an old bar. The dim yellow light, the stale smoke, and the damp smell in the air gave the place a heavy, dangerous aura. Daniel spread a city map across the table, placing the USB Marcus had brought right in the center. This is the only thing that can bring Sterling down. But data alone isn't enough. We need witnesses, a plan, and guts, Helena cut in, her voice sharp. Sterling has a web of protection. Politicians, cops, judges, they're all on his payroll. If we release this without preparation, the only thing that'll happen is we disappear. Marcus looked at them, conflicted. He'd only wanted a driver's job to provide for Kayla, and now here he was, embroiled in a plot that could shake the entire city. So what do we do? He asked. Daniel locked eyes with him, deadly serious. You're the only one still close to Sterling, the one he doesn't suspect yet. You'll be our eyes, ears, and hands inside. Helena and I will handle the rest. Marcus clenched his fists, Kayla's innocent face flashing in his mind. He knew, once he stepped in, there was no way back. But if he didn't, his daughter would live forever under Sterling's shadow. He nodded firmly. All right, we'll bring him down. Not just for me, but for everyone he's destroyed. Back at Sterling's mansion, Marcus felt every step weighed down with dread. The familiar halls, the cold walls, the echoing footsteps were now a battlefield. He wasn't just a chauffeur anymore. He was a spy. One mistake, and he'd pay with his life, and Kayla's. That morning, Sterling gave his command. Important meeting today at the financial center. Drive me, and remember, never late. Marcus nodded, but inside he was ready. He discreetly attached a tiny recorder beneath the leather back seat. Daniel's gift, his first weapon in this war. On the drive, Sterling took call after call, his voice steady, chilling. Transfer the funds by the end of the week. If they won't sign, remind them of the 2019 accident. Do you understand? Marcus's pulse pounded. Every careless phrase, another nail in Sterling's coffin. At the financial tower, Sterling stepped out, pausing only to instruct, "Stay here. Don't move." Marcus nodded, but the moment Sterling vanished inside, he pulled out his phone, syncing it with the recorder. Data blinked on screen, capturing every damning word. A faint smile crossed his lips. "Mr. Sterling, this time, your own mouth will take you down." Marcus had just transferred the recorder's data onto his phone when suddenly the car door yanked open. He nearly dropped the device. Sterling stood there, face stone cold, eyes sharp as blades. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice calm but laced with menace. Marcus's mind spun for an excuse. Forcing a shaky smile, he held up his phone. "Just checking the GPS, sir. Wanted to be sure the car's ready when you're done." Sterling stared at him for several long, suffocating seconds. Marcus swore the man could hear his heart slamming in his chest. Finally, Sterling gave a slight nod. "Good, that's the kind of caution I expect. Keep it up, Johnson." Never give me a reason to doubt you. He shut the door and walked into the building. Marcus slumped back into the seat, exhaling hard, his shirt clinging with sweat. He whispered, "Too close, but I've got the evidence now, and the game's only just begun." That night, Marcus drove a winding route, deliberately checking his mirrors for tails. Only when he was sure no strange car followed did he pull into a narrow alley where Helena and Daniel waited in a shabby diner near the bus station. Helena looked up, worry in her eyes. "Do you have something?" Marcus nodded, placing his phone on the table. "I've got proof." Sterling's own voice. Money laundering, political threats. If this leaks, he can't deny a thing. Daniel carefully plugged in headphones and hit play. Sterling's chilling voice filled the silence, calm and damning. Daniel's fist clenched as he nodded firmly. "This is it, the first piece of the puzzle." Helena placed a hand gently on Marcus's shoulder. "You've done something incredibly dangerous, but you're not alone anymore. We're a team." Marcus looked at them, a weight lifting even as tension pressed heavier on his chest. He knew the deeper they went, the deadlier it would become. But for the first time since this began, he didn't feel like he was fighting alone. He clenched his fist, thinking, "Sterling, you've got power, you've got money, but this time you'll face the truth." The next morning, as Marcus pulled up to the mansion, the atmosphere had changed. 2 brand new bodyguards stood at the gate, their eyes cutting into him like blades. Inside, the butler no longer greeted him politely, but instead watched silently, cold and calculating. Then Sterling appeared, wearing his signature thin smile, but his eyes were sharper than ever. He circled Marcus like a predator sniffing a strange scent on its prey. "You've been working hard lately, Johnson," Sterling said slowly. "Too hard. Makes me wonder, are you keeping something from me?" Marcus kept his composure, bowing slightly. "I only do what you ask, sir." Sterling let out a quiet laugh, but it chilled Marcus to the bone. He laid a hand on Marcus's shoulder, squeezing gently, a touch that felt more like a warning. "In this game, Johnson, loyalty isn't something you can fake, and when I find a traitor—" He leaned in close, whispering, "I cut them out at the root. Leave no trace." Marcus pressed his lips tight, hiding his fear. He understood. Sterling was beginning to suspect him, and from this moment on, every word, every move would be under the billionaire's magnifying glass. That evening, Sterling summoned Marcus into his private study. The grand room, lit by a pale yellow glow on polished wood panels, felt suffocating with tension. Sterling sat behind his desk, fingers interlaced, eyes drilling into Marcus. "Johnson, it's time you proved your loyalty." Marcus froze, heart pounding. "What do you want me to do?" Sterling snapped his fingers. 2 bodyguards dragged in a bound man, gagged and bruised, throwing him to the floor. The man's terrified eyes darted around the room. "This," Sterling said slowly, "is a traitor. I want you to end him. Right here. If you truly belong to me, this is your chance to prove it." Marcus's breath caught in his throat. His mind flashed to Kayla, her innocent eyes, her radiant smile. He knew refusing meant death, but obeying meant losing his soul. Sterling rose, placing a cold gun into Marcus's trembling hand. Leaning close, he whispered, "Loyalty isn't words, Johnson. It's carved in action." Marcus's fist clenched, torn between survival and conscience. He was standing at the razor's edge, between life and death, truth and darkness. Marcus gripped the gun, cold sweat running down his temple. The bound man whimpered on the floor, eyes pleading. Behind him, Sterling's stare burned sharp as a knife against his neck. A storm of thoughts raged in Marcus's head. "If I pull the trigger, I'm a murderer. If I don't, Kayla's in danger. I need a way out." He raised the gun, pointing it directly at the man's head. The room froze in suffocating silence. Sterling smirked, certain Marcus was about to obey, but in that instant, Marcus twisted the barrel upward and fired into the ceiling light. Bang! Glass shattered, plunging the room into darkness. Shouts and crashes erupted in the chaos. Seizing the moment, Marcus kicked the gun aside and lunged for the bound man, dragging him into a corner. He whispered harshly, "Stay quiet. If you want to live, follow me." Sterling's furious roar cut through the dark. "Johnson, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Marcus panted, heart racing, but his mind had never been clearer. He knew the game had reached its deadliest point. From this moment on, Sterling wouldn't just suspect him, he'd hunt him. Marcus burst out of the mansion that night, dragging the bound man, a living witness, behind him. his breath ragged, heart racing, but his mind clear. He had to strike before Sterling did. Helena and Daniel were waiting in the dingy hideout. Their jaws dropped as Marcus laid the man, the folder, and the USB on the table. "It's time," Marcus said firmly. "We put it all out there. If we don't, none of us will live to see tomorrow." Daniel dove into the laptop, blasting the files across multiple media outlets and to the few prosecutors still unbought. Helena steadied the witness, recording his statement. Every damning detail about Sterling. Within hours, headlines exploded. "Billionaire Richard Sterling exposed in corruption and criminal network." Sterling raged. He made calls, issued threats, but his empire crumbled piece by piece. Politicians abandoned him. Honest cops stormed his mansion. Marcus watched live as Sterling was dragged out in handcuffs, his face cold, but his eyes burning with hatred. He roared, "Johnson! You'll pay for this!" Marcus clenched his fists, but this time fear didn't touch him. He knew Kayla was safe. Helena placed a hand on his shoulder, whispering, "You did it." "Sterling's finished," Marcus exhaled deeply, pulling Kayla's photo from his wallet. He whispered, "For you, sweetheart. This time we get to live free."